Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Saturday of the Victory Road World Cup of Pokemon VGC, brought to you by GG Tour, Metafy, and Elgato. My name is Mabel Rourke. I am psyched to once again be on the mic on Saturday with Ben. Ben, it has been a couple weeks since you and I last spoke, so now we get to, I think we get to be able to see a couple matches from both of our home teams this weekend.
Yeah, it should be really exciting. I'm really looking forward to seeing what both of these teams have to bring, and I've got to give a little bit of a shout out to Norway, who we'll be seeing later as well. Finally, being able to make it to the group stages as well. We'll get onto more of that in a little bit later. In the meantime, before we go into the matches, we've got to make sure that we go through all of the socials that you guys can follow the World Cup on. We have the Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, and Discord, of course. So if you aren't already following all of the action from the World Cup, do make sure that you come and have a look. Give all of these channels a follow so you can keep up with all the action. And of course, there is the website as well, World Cup of VGC or worldcupvgc.com.
Yeah, exactly. There's, of course, a lot of great ways for you to follow along with the action. But of course, the best way to follow along with the action is to kind of just start here and watch the streams of the matches that we can bring you guys. And we'll be starting off with an absolutely killer match with Wonseok Jung of South Korea versus Bas van der Heijden. And I'm super, super excited to see the Netherlands again. I know we had a couple of really good matches, I believe, last week as well. That were really nice to be, that were really fun for me as a spectator. I think if we saw them on Sunday morning, I might have, or Sunday my time, I might have been able to catch that.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, no strangers to competition. Poland and, of course, Uruguay coming in next. Norway and the United States. And the match that I'm really looking forward to, UK versus Peru. So some really, really great games here. As I said earlier, Norway making it out of the qualifiers for the first time, getting into the group stages. We have, and I have to give a shout out here, for the UK versus Peru. We were paired in last year's World Cup in 2021 in the group stages, and there's a little bit of a rivalry going on, certainly from our side, because Peru managed to make it all the way to the top 16 and knocked us out, unfortunately, a little bit later on in the competition. So really, from my perspective, looking forward to those later games. So make sure you keep tuned for those.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just glad that I was not the one that drew that, because I already got enough ire from a couple of my co-casters who are from England for originally pulling them to play against Germany in the original qualifying stage. So the fact that this one was not on me, I did let out a gigantic laugh when I saw it, and immediately got a DM from Jamie saying we have been paired with another person from last year. So, you know, I think the rematch is going to be really interesting. Of course, I'm psyched to see the United States and South Korea, both of which we haven't really been able to feature yet, because neither of those teams had to go through the qualifying stage like 48 of the other teams did. So, you know, both of these teams did incredibly well last year. They both placed in top 8. South Korea finished in top 4. Finished in top 4. So, and I mean, you always know that South Korea is going to bring their A game when it comes to these teams. Their team building is incredible. Their team structure is incredible. They always do a really nice job. I think they complement each other very well, especially when you're moving from playing in a region that is very centralized, like Southeast Asia, versus playing on a world stage.
Yeah, it's very different coming into these sort of tournaments, playing against every different meta game that you can think of. It's, as you say, maybe it is so centralized in different places in the world, and you see slightly different trends with slightly different players and their preferences, of course. And of course, South Korea only losing to Italy at the end of the draft, but of course they are going to be up against Netherlands, and the Netherlands did very well in the qualifier stages, so got a little bit of a momentum behind them. Actually undefeated so far. They won all 3 of their matches in the qualifiers. And of course, the player that we've got, Bars, is actually a new manager for them. So looking forward to seeing how they are doing, but also looking forward to seeing the teams, because if there's a little bit of a trend coming out from the Netherlands, kind of want to see another little bit of a Reshiram action going on.
I mean, if you're imagining that they're team building together, I think we will be able to possibly get something pretty funky like that. But other than that Reshiram team, which is still trending towards meta, a lot of these teams are, they're very standard. There's nothing that's really kind of jumping out as a big surprise. And honestly, that makes a lot of sense to me because you're kind of at this point in the competition where you need to sit with a solid game plan to continue to move on. And maybe you can go for something funky a little bit later if you know you've already secured your win to go on to the next stage of the competition, which will be the playoffs. So, I'm psyched to be able to kind of see this. I love kind of seeing these really standard teams, especially as we creep towards Worlds in a couple of weeks, because this is the kind of stuff you're most likely going to be seeing when we are all in London mid-August. So it's nice to be able to see what these trainers are bringing, what they're feeling comfortable with, maybe able to give you a little bit of insight as well into how they're faring for their prep. But if we want to take a look here at these trainer profiles, there is a lot here on both sides, really. But Wonseok has Trainers Cup champion, Global Exhibition finalist, Trainers Cup champion 2 years in a row, actually. And he's already a 2-time Worlds Day 2 competitor. He's incredibly talented in South Korea, very well known. He's somebody that has kind of just been a really big staple from that region. And Bas van der Heijden also doing incredibly well. European Internationals top 64 this year, which was an incredibly tough competition. I think it was a really stacked internats because that was when people were finally able to start coming back for these big events, and everybody was kind of scrambling to get in and get some points and see their friends again.
Exactly. And, that's definitely something to write home about because, everybody was trying to get into that competition. People flew out from all over the world to play in it, and it was so great to see all of the players again, as well as see them pitting themselves against each other offline rather than online. For those that don't know, Wonseok, the Trainers Cup champion, that's the equivalent of Korean Nationals. So a really big event in Korea, and especially filled with lots of players. We're seeing the teams here coming out from Wonseok being sort of similar to Rinya's son, but the Gastrodon being replaced with Regieleki. So a little bit of a spin and a different matchup, a different way to play different matchups to what we usually see in those compositions. And a Reshiram coming out from Baz here, paired with that Zacian, a Gastrodon, and a Whimsicott Incineroar Thunderous.
Yeah, I love Regieleki. I know if Lou was here, she would say exactly the same thing. Regieleki is such a fun Pokemon to me, and I'm so happy that it's been able to get use in this format, as well as the format of last year's World Cup that we were able to kind of see it thrive in. I do love the switch of that versus Gastrodon. Especially a lot of Grimmsnarl right now have kind of changed from being that screens, that really defensive. A lot of them are running that Trick Iron Ball or Trick Lagging Tail, along with usually a couple of other different moves. So you have to put yourself in a slightly more offensive position and maybe allow for your Regieleki to outspeed some things, even if maybe with Tailwind they were not outspeeding, kind of puts them in a nice position. And, Charizard is, I think, a Pokemon that we have seen since Series 1, back when you could only use it with Blaze, back with Aaron Traylor winning Dallas in 2020 with it. And I think it will never stop. I feel like we will see it until we move on to Scarlet and Violet. But for these trainers, it's going to be the Whimsicott Zacian coming out on Baz's side. So a nice offensive lead with a great amount of support from Whimsicott. And then we will be seeing from Wonseok's side, it is the Grimmsnarl and the Groudon.
Yeah, interesting lead combinations here. And I think the team compositions make a lot of impact in how these trainers are going to approach it. The Regieleki from Gastrodon is not particularly a great switch up into this particular build, especially because Baz has both the Reshiram and a Whimsicott, which could be carrying a lot of speed control options to shut that Regieleki down. Like the lead from Groudon here from Wonseok, because it does put pressure on both the Zacian and on the Reshiram, and can go for its Dynamax form, get some Max Quakes going, and start building up a little bit of defensive action. Because if Baz has trained this Reshiram to be quite strong, and especially with the Sun boosting it from Wonseok's side, it's going to be putting on so much pressure, and that's something that Wonseok's going to have to be careful of, especially since Reshiram's typing does resist most of the other really powerful moves from Wonseok's side of the field.
Zacian switches out here, possibly not wanting to take something like a Precipice Blades from this Groudon. Grimmsnarl will follow suit, bring in the Charizard as well. So now two Pokemon that are not grounded. Whimsicott actually going, I believe, for the for the charm here. I'm sorry, I'm always mixing
that is
up
charm.
those. Yeah, charm there to help lower the stats. While this Groudon here goes for that Precipice Blades, will only hit into that Whimsicott. Does not do a whole lot of damage here, surprisingly, and then also reveals. Sorry, that is the solar power. My brain just immediately went life form.
Not quite yet. That Charizard hasn't been able to attack just yet. But and to be honest, it might not have an opportunity to this turn. It's a really really reactive play here from Buzz, both playing the defensive pivot into that Thunderous, which is great against Groudon. Groudon can always go for a rock move, but it's probably not going to in front of Zacian. And then also putting on pressure with its offensive capabilities against this Charizard that's just come in, and just as quickly as it comes in, it's leaving the field.
Yeah, Grimmsnarl switches back in here. Going to be a Dynamax, though, from Baz's side. Most likely going to be that Thunderous. Dynamax Whimsicott tends to be something that you see only in the most extreme of situations. Dynamax Thunderous, also a Pokemon that we've been seeing a ton recently, having the ability to go with those Defiance, get those boosts when you get a drop on one of your stats, allows it to put on a ton of offensive pressure, and it's going to also be able to pair with this Whimsicott who goes... Actually, I am really surprised here exactly as to what that was. Thunderous, though, goes for a Max Lightning into this Grimmsnarl, does a ton of damage, gets a full one-hit knockout, and sets that electric terrain.
Yeah, I think that was likely the helping hand on the Whimsicott there, coming into the Thunderous, boosting up the damage, and no surprise there if that's the case. Combined with this Life Orb that it managed to knock out the Grimmsnarl in one, and a Heat Crash comes out in response from this Groudon.
Yeah, sorry. Forgive me for not catching that helping hand there. Of course, something that Thunderous loves to have that option for. Whimsicott doesn't always carry helping hand right now, though. It's, one of the... Whimsicott has 4 move slots, and all of them are so important. So it having both Charm and Helping Hand, I think, is really interesting, because oftentimes Helping Hand is the move that gets dropped when you're carrying something like Charm to lower the attack of a Pokemon like Groudon. Reshiram here is going to switch in, and Zacian is then coming in for that fainted Grimmsnarl slot.
You know what? If I was Wonseok right now, I would be quivering slightly, let's say. That Thunderous, it's got its electric terrain up, and that's fine. It's not going to benefit itself in terms of damage too much, but it will depend on how Wonseok has trained his Pokemon, what items that he's given it, as to how effective that's his team's going to be against this Reshiram. We haven't seen a max yet from Wonseok, so probably a max option would be quite good, but since that Charm went off onto the Whimsicott, onto that Groudon, it's not the best max option available. And Thunderous, of course, in its max form, will take quite a lot of damage from a Zacian, but will likely be able to get the max airstream going, get that Reshiram faster than the Zacian, almost certainly, if not with 1 airstream, then with 2. And in the sun, it's just going to do so much damage.
Yeah, but Groudon now trying to match that damage output, even with that -2 attack that it got from the Charm earlier. So still goes for this Dynamax, trying to put on this offensive pressure onto this big threat that is either really the Reshiram or the Thunderous here, both of them putting on so much pressure onto the opposite side. Zacian, though, just going for Protect, trying to stay a little bit safer, stall out one of these turns. Going to allow for this Thunderous, though, to go for the max Airstream into the Groudon slot, actually. Does a pretty decent chunk of damage for a max Airstream itself. Going to raise the speed of the Pokemon on the opposite side of the field, which this Reshiram will certainly enjoy having a little bit more of a boost, and allow them to go faster than that Zacian on the next turn. Groudon, though, going to be able to go for this Max Quake, and that is going to target into the Reshiram slot. That does still a lot of damage into this Reshiram, even brings it down to under half of its HP, and gets that really important special defense boost as well.
Yeah, there was something that we missed there as well. I think there was a move that Reshiram used that targeted, I presume, into Groudon, and based on what we're seeing here and what's most likely, could have been that Blue Flare, which is such a powerful move on Reshiram, but doesn't have the best accuracy in the world. And so, if I'm right here, that was a Blue Flare into Groudon that didn't actually connect, because we didn't see that Protect go off from the Zacian. As it happens, though, we have got a increased speed on the Reshiram, so if Bars wanted to, they could probably try to go for that again, try to remove the Groudon from players. Most commonly, it does carry that Assault Vest item, and even with the Assault Vest and the +1 special defense, there's still half a chance, I think, that the Reshiram could knock it down into range.
Yeah, another max airstream from this Thundurus into the Groudon, though. Also, that Charizard switched in, so maybe trying to not take a blue flare super effectively from the Reshiram here. Nice speed boost as well for both of the Pokemon on the opposite side of the field. There is going to be actually the Reshiram going for that blue flare on this turn into the Charizard. It's still enough for that knockout. Critical hit as well. So, you know, that critical hit, I think, doing a nice amount of damage, boosted with the Sun as well for this Reshiram. Groudon, though, going for another Max Quake, targeting into this Reshiram, but I feel like this Reshiram still did pretty nice work and will take that trade-off of getting the knockout onto that Charizard.
Yeah, and I think this is the real key to the matchup. Reshiram beats everything on Wonseok side of the field, and whether that critical hit mattered or not, you know, it still would have done quite a bit of damage, and maybe the Charizard goes down to the solar power chip on the next turn. In the meantime, of course, Groudon is going to be able to knock out the Reshiram, get its special defense boost up, but special defense boost won't be too effective against this Zacian coming in, especially in combination with the Thundurus on Barz's side of the field. And so, yeah, now it's a case of we've got both a Zacian and a pretty speedy Thundurus against this Groudon that's probably in KO range. Unfortunately for Barz, hasn't been able to attack it with anything specially based, so doesn't know if it's carrying Assault Vest on the Groudon or not on Wonseok's side of the field, and maybe that gives Wonseok a little bit of an advantage here with the risk of going for a Max Guard and Barz having to maybe split focus here on how he goes about doing as much damage as possible.
Doesn't look like there is a Max Guard here. There is going to be a Wild Charge from that Thundurus into the Zacian on the opposite side of the field. Does a pretty nice chunk of damage here. And then the Zacian on Baz's side of the field as well, going for that Behemoth Blade. Gonna still be able to do a really nice chunk of damage onto this Dynamax Groudon. And if it's enough for the knockout, it is really important here because now this Groudon cannot do anything in retaliation to stop the Zacian on the opposite side of the field with something like a Max Quake or a Max Flare. So a nice move to kind of be able to stop that, but another Behemoth Blade from Wonseok's side of the field is still going to be able to do a really good amount of damage onto this opposite Zacian. Does a ton, brings it down to the bottom 25% of its HP. So, you know, I think Wonseok is in a little bit of a tougher position because he's dealing with two Pokemon that are already faster than him, and that Zacian never got that speed boost either.
No, it didn't, and that could be quite telling for the next games if Buzz is confident about how they've trained their Zacian. Then they'll know whether Wonseok Zacian is faster or not, or if maybe it's a speed tie here, all within the realms of possibility. But unlikely that we'll find out here that the Thundurus could knock out the Zacian on Wonseok's side of the field with another Wild Charge, and if it doesn't, Zacian can only target one Pokemon at a time. So, you know, we've at least got one attack going into Zacian this turn, and probably one attack from Barz next turn. So, likely going to wrap up the game for Barz, and Wonseok will take the loss for South Korea in Game 1, and we'll see what happens in Game 2 because I think, you know, it came down pretty close, 2-1 Pokemon count, but it could have gone a slightly different way if maybe a few switch-ups had been slightly different, and Wonseok had maybe managed to get himself into a slightly better position early doors.
Yeah, I think something that I would like to see in that next game maybe is if you go for that G-Max Charizard and you try and get that G-Max Wildfire off, because I think having the opportunity for residual damage, even if you can just continue to do small chips on some of the Pokemon on the opposite side of the field, excluding that Reshiram, you're going to be in a nicer position to maybe get some knockouts if you bring your Zacian in late game. I mean, you know, with most Zacian, they do about 75% of HP with one Behemoth Blade onto another Zacian. Yep. So then if you're able to maybe get a couple of turns of that Wildfire chip, you may be able to get a knockout onto a Zacian earlier than maybe you would have anticipated. And I think that could be pretty helpful moving forward. Like you said, those special defense boosts didn't do a whole lot when there were two physical attackers left on the field. We never saw a max steel spike, so no way of boosting the defense on that Groudon. And if you bring in something that isn't a physical attacker, maybe in front of a Whimsicott in the lead, you're not really worrying too much about getting charmed.
No, and I think, you know, speaking about that, charm actually could have made a massive difference to the game plan here. I mean, you know, the Groudon still actually ended up doing really well for Wonseok in the game. It, you know, created a bit of a foothold for Wonseok to be able to knock out that Reshiram. And if you leave that Reshiram unchecked, it's just going to run through your team. So, yeah, there's a lot of interactions here that that really do make a big difference. But no switch up from Bars here, going with that Whimsicott and the Zacian, and a really nice change up here from Wonseok, going for that Grimmsnarl and Zacian here. And if this Grimmsnarl on Wonseok's side of the field has a little bit of speed control going on, it really could change the flow of this match.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, if you're able to go for something like Trick, if you have Lagging Tail and you can force that Zacian on the other side of the field to go possibly last or slower with something like an Iron Ball for the rest of the game, you know, then you're putting yourself in a great position, especially if, like last game, we saw that the Zacian on Boz's side was faster. That may, you know, they could speed tie, so that could be, you know, we only saw really one turn of Zacian versus Zacian. So we don't have really enough data points, I guess, would be kind of the way to phrase it. But I think, you know, Whimsicott, we saw how helpful it is, even with Helping Hand. Can still go for something like a Charm into a Zacian, which this Zacian is certainly not going to appreciate being brought down to -1. And then the Grimmsnarl here actually goes for a Scary Face, so that is still going to be able to lower the speed of that Zacian. No trick necessary, just trying to put some pressure on early. Still going to allow for the Zacian on Wonseok's side of the field to go first with a Behemoth Blade into the Whimsicott. Brings it down to its Focus Sash, so those charms really not mattering a whole lot when it comes to dealing with a frail Pokemon like Whimsicott. Nice little bit of item just to confirm that you're not carrying some weird extra trick eject button, as you're dealing now with another Behemoth Blade into the Grimmsnarl on Wonseok's side. The Grimmsnarl now immediately off of the field after this first turn, and you gotta hope that that Scary Face was worth it if that's the only thing your Grimmsnarl was able to bring.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you've hit the nail on the head there, Maeve, because when you use Scary Face rather than something like Thunder Wave or Trick, it's a non-permanent, you know, speed reduction. So the likelihood is, especially with the speed drop, this Zacian is probably going to be going out from Bars, and so that Scary Face is going to be reset. You know, and Bars has to be a little bit careful here, right? Because switching out the Zacian and leaving the Whimsicott on the field, maybe you get some speed control going, maybe you get another Charm going, but you're probably going to be taking quite a lot of damage this turn in order to switch out that Zacian and just get that speed reset. In the meantime, Wonseok could take advantage of that sort of position, go for getting some airstreams and some speed control of his own, and bringing himself into a good spot here. And I think that's going to be important. You know, how does Bars really navigate the offensive pressure that Wonseok has on the field? And also, how does Wonseok take advantage of the space that he's created with getting that speed drop on the Zacian?
Yeah, and he's going to hope to try and create some extra space here, bringing this Groudon in to boost the solar power ability of that Charizard, who he is immediately matching with that Gigantamax. So G-Max Charizard able to put out a ton of pressure. That G-Max Wildfire can easily just take care of that Whimsicott if you target into the other slot on, you know, the side of the field. Just allow that Whimsicott, maybe if it's going to go for a Tailwind, just let it go for the Tailwind anyway, and maybe see if you can get a good target onto the Zacian on Boz's side with something super effective. Whimsicott does go for the Tailwind this turn, is trying to get that extra boost to speed, but there is no switch out here for this Zacian. It is just going to stay and go for this Behemoth Blade onto the opposite side of the field and just try and do some big damage onto this G-Max Charizard. Behemoth Blade does a ton of damage, honestly. Brings it down probably to about like 30% of its HP, but it will probably take this Wildfire in retaliation for a whole one-hit knockout here and bring this Whimsicott down on that following turn.
Yeah, the Wildfire chip going to be able to knock out the Whimsicott, being brought down to its sash, in fact, and the solar power damage going to be launching itself onto the Charizard. So I quite like that from Buzz, actually. Just saying, do you know what? This Zacian switching out is going to remove all of my offensive capability. I know that I can Tailwind and get a load of damage onto this Charizard and come in with what's in the back. What's in the back looks pretty good as well, actually. Setting up a fresh Tailwind, getting a Thunderous in that's going to be naturally faster than the Charizard on Wonseok's side of the field, and that all-important Reshiram that's both kind of going to resist the Charizard, at least not going to take any residual damage from the G-Max Wildfire, also going to quad resist the fire attack as well. So you know, Charizard kind of wants to Airstream here, but it's almost forced to in this case, rather than being able to deal as effectively with the Thunderous. And of course, Groudon in the sun, even holding the likely Assault Vest that I think we've seen in the background here, is going to take so much damage from this Reshiram, especially if it manages to launch its Max Flare. And of course, there is also the option that Reshiram could go big here and just remove all of the accuracy issues that it's got with that blue flare. Make sure it targets down the Groudon and or the Charizard on Wonseok's side of the field, and there it is. It's gonna be going big. It's gonna be doing lots of damage here.
It is going big as the anime made it seem to me, just in a little bit of a different way here. Thundurus, though, able to go for a wild charge into that Charizard, getting that knockout early. No way you're going to be able to set up a max airstream in front of me, even if you bring in your Zacian. Still going to have the ability to use that Tailwind that Whimsicott so kindly set up earlier to allow for your Pokemon to go a little bit faster. Reshiram, though, goes for that max flare into this Groudon slot, boosted by the sun. This does a ton of damage, even if this is, like you said, that Assault Vest there. So Groudon firing back with a Precipice Blade, not affecting that Thundurus, but doing a nice little chunk of damage onto the Reshiram. Thundurus as well, taking that extra little bit of chip damage from that G-Max Wildfire and leaving Wonseok down to his 2 restricted Pokemon, bringing in this Zacian.
Yeah, the interesting thing here, I don't know how much it's going to really affect the game, is that the Tailwind is running out pretty soon. So at the moment, the Reshiram and the Thundurus are faster than the Zacian. They're going to be this turn and the next turn are going to be faster. So Zacian may be able to kind of hold on a little bit with some protects from Wonseok's side of the field. But likelihood is that Bars will be able to just knock out the Groudon with this turn with the Reshiram if they choose to do so. Or just go straight into that Protect on the... or straight into the Zacian, try to knock it out. Even if the Zacian does go for a Protect, it's going to still do loads of damage in the sun through that Protect. And so, yeah, there's a few ways I think that Wonseok may be able to come back into this game, but it will depend on how Bars targets and how he uses all of the offensive capabilities that he's got at his disposal right now.
Yeah, Zacian here protects. It's not going to be able to take any damage from that Thundurus from targeted onto it, with most likely a wild charge there. A max Wormwind, though, is going to be enough to knock out the Groudon, but most importantly, it's going to get an attack drop onto this Zacian. Going to bring it down to neutral after getting its Intrepid Sword boost when it first came in. Again, a little bit more chip. Honestly, the chip really does add up as these games go on. The Thunder is now under 50% of its HP, but this just means that it's Zacian facing down 2 Pokemon that can do really good damage.
We saw in the first game that the Wild Charge did near enough 50% to this Zacian, so we'll have to see if that happens again. A double Protect coming out from Wonseok, though, managing to launch out and make sure he's protected this turn. The Wild Charge, of course, bounces off that Protect and the Max Flare goes into it, and wow, that's a lot of damage coming out from that Reshiram. And yeah, both the Thunder is definitely now in range of any attack that the Zacian wants to come at it with, even with that max Wormwind drop going on there. But yeah, this Reshiram, if it's able to hit whether that's with Earth Power or Blue Flare, it's definitely going to be able to knock it out. And I'm not sure that Zacian has enough gas in the tank to be able to knock out that Reshiram in one.
It looks like that Blue Flare missed, though, from that Reshiram, so that Wild Charge into the Zacian does a good chunk of damage, bringing it down to the bottom 25%. However, oh, actually, sorry, this Reshiram is able to go for that Blue Flare into the Zacian and get the knockout there. I must have just misread it. I believe it was a Play Rough miss from the Zacian.
Yeah, most likely could have been, and that's a really rough Play Rough.
Yeah, that is a rough Play Rough miss, if I'm not mistaken there. So only, what, a 5% chance to miss, 95% accuracy, I believe. So, you know, if that's kind of the way that it was, that double Protect to stall out the Tailwind, allowing you to go first and go for a Play Rough to get that knockout. You know that the Thundurus cannot knock you out in one hit, so then if you're faster, you can get that knockout on that second turn. You're playing to your out, and you lose in the most frustrating way, and I wasn't even able to give it its due credit for how frustrating that Play Rough miss can be.
Yeah, it always hurts when you're going for those Play Roughs in those situations, because normally when you're risking a Play Rough rather than going for something like a Sacred Sword or a Behemoth Blade, it's because you really need to take that KO. And it's really unfortunate when those don't come off. You know, whether or not it would have knocked out the Reshiram, only those players will know. You know, we can speculate, of course, but unfortunately we didn't get to see it come off. And the Blue Flare did manage to connect. So really well played game there from Bard. I think he really managed the board state so well. I got that Reshiram in 2 games into a position where it could do lots and lots of work, even in front of that Groudon, which really, when one restricted Pokemon on your opposing side of the field does so much damage to both of the restricted Pokemon on yours, it's a really tough ask to be able to position them in such a way where you can put the appropriate amount of pressure on so that that isn't quite as important. So really well played there from Bars, well played there from Wonseok. Unfortunately for South Korea, Netherlands will be taking that game and taking another set. And I believe that will even up the match between South Korea and the Netherlands 2-2.
We got a little bit of a behind the scenes sneak peek. It is currently 3-2 for the Netherlands. So the Netherlands actually showing a lot of might against this strong Titan that is the South Korean team. So, we will be back with more exciting matches. Hopefully we can continue to bring you guys stuff that is just as back and forth as that last game was. So do not go anywhere. We will be back very shortly.